When you look at this story that was read to us, a part of the story, it's important to realize, first of all, that it is a parable. A parable is a short story that is open-ended, a story that invites continual conversation regarding meaning and application. What does this story mean, and how are we to use it in our lives? What is this parable trying to tell us and to teach us about God, to tell us and to teach us about humanity? I think it's also important to know that this is the only parable that Jesus inserts himself as the main character. What is it that Jesus is trying to teach? The story is about the final judgment, the day when all things will finally be made right. And the story begins with a lot of drama, a lot of pomp and circumstance as the Son of Man enters the scene, accompanied by the angels taking his seat upon the throne of glory. And then the nations are gathered all over the world. And they're put into two groups. And I think it's important to pay attention to the criteria, to pay attention to the differentiating factors between Group A and Group B, between the sheep and the goats, which when I moved here about 25 years ago, someone warned me, do not use this text, that begin to differentiate those of the sheep origin and those of the goat origin. Now remember, Jesus used familiar examples as he taught. And so this idea of separating the sheep from the goats was very familiar because it was common for shepherds to have mixed herds, both sheep and goats in the same place. But at night, every night they separated the sheep from the goats. The sheep enjoyed the open air of the pasture, while goats had to be protected from the cold. And also because sheep had more of a commercial value, and they were preferred over goats. So again, the image of separating the two groups was common among his audience. But again, what criteria did the shepherd use in creating the groups? In looking at the parable, it certainly was not ethnicity. In spite of popular thought among the Hebrews, among the Jews, the two groups were not Group A, the Jews, and Group B, the Gentiles, everyone else. Nor was it based on religion. Listen up, Jews over here, and those who recognize themselves as God's chosen, as God's children, as God's favorite. Everyone come over here, and everyone else over here. Religious belief wasn't the proverbial line that was drawn in the sand. Those who profess Jesus as the only way to God over here, and everyone else over here, the Hindus, the Buddhists, the Muslims, the Jews, the anyone else who do not profess Jesus over here, please. It really doesn't matter what your name is because what you believe really doesn't matter. Unlike today, the criteria that divided the two groups is rather simple. Again, having nothing to do with ethnicity, with religion, with politics, with sexual orientation, with socioeconomic status, with education, and the list goes on and on and on. In this story of the Last Judgment, the Son of Man drew the line in the sand, so to speak, and said, listen up, those of you who treated each other with compassion, stand over here and know that you're blessed. Those of you who ignored human need, for whatever reason, it doesn't matter, whatever argument you have to justify your actions, keep them to yourself. Stand over here and know that you're accursed and you are in need of more refining. That's it. Those who fed me when I was hungry, stand over here. Those who did not, stand over here. Those who gave me something to drink to quench my thirst, stand over here. Those who did not, stand over here. Those who welcomed me when I was a stranger and alone, stand over here. Those who did not, over here, please. Those who clothed my naked body, please stand over here. Those who did not, over here. Those who took care of me when I was sick and visited me when I was in prison, stand over here. Those who did not, please stand over here. For those, for whatever reason, who stood under whatever banner, responded to meet human needs, stand over here. And those who did not, stand over here. That's it. That's it. A and B. Now, what I find telling and very interesting is in this story, it is neither Group A or Group B who knew what they were doing. They were just living life. They were just going about their business. Because when you read the whole parable, both groups have the same response. They both say the same thing. And when was it that we saw you, a stranger, and welcomed you, or naked, and gave you clothing? And when was it that we saw you sick or in prison and visited you? When was it that we took care of you? Could you remind us of that? Both groups asked the same questions. Oh, my Lord Jesus, if we had only known it was you. But we didn't know. We didn't know it was you. I mean, if we had known it was you, well, boy, we would have responded like nobody's business. We would have gone over the top. We didn't see you in that other person. And there's so many other needs. There's no way. There's no way that we could all meet those needs. And we were wondering, those of us in Group B, we've been kind of talking amongst ourselves, Jesus, and we were wondering, could we come up with maybe some subcategories? After all, having just category A and category B is rather limiting, don't you think? Maybe we could have some subcategories. How about A1? A1 would be, okay, those who didn't realize it was me, but would have responded differently if you had known. Okay, what about A2? A2 could be those of you who kept thinking that you should do something but just got too busy and would forget. Okay, what about A3? Those of you who didn't think it was up to you. Okay, we didn't think it was up to us. That's the problem, Jesus. That's the problem with so many people, so many problems in the world and churches and organizations. There's just too many cooks. There's just too many chiefs. There's not enough. We didn't know it was. We didn't know it was. We were supposed to do anything. Okay, what about A4? How about category A4? We're underqualified. Who are we? We don't have the resources to do all that. Can you respond, Jesus? Can you just say something? Truly I tell you, just as you did it to one of the least of these who are members of my family, you did it to me. It doesn't get any more personal than that, does it? Have you ever had someone in your family slighted by somebody else? Hurt by another? Dismissed? Mistreated? Overlooked? it does something to you, doesn't it? You take it personally, don't you? To the point that you want to do something about it. Take matters into your own hands. How about just talking? Have you ever had someone just talk about your family? You know, it's interesting. I'm only going to speak for myself, but I think there may be a few who can relate to what I'm about to say. I can talk about my family. But don't you talk about my family. That is where I will quickly draw that line. Don't you dare. You see, this is what happens when we take things personally, isn't it? We naturally want to take matters into our own hands. We want to do something about it. Don't you be talking about my family. When it's family, it's personal. Years ago, I remember sitting in the midst of folk, and a lady, a well-respected lady in many circles, decided that she would just expose an ugly side of herself to us. She began talking about Mexicans. Her word, not mine. It didn't matter where she learned it. What mattered is that she used it. Well, her words not only caught my ear, but my fury. And I told her that I would appreciate her if she would refrain from using such racial and derogatory slurs. I said, you can say Mexican American, Hispanic, Latino. Now, her response, it kind of got quiet. And her response was, I didn't mean anything by it. Besides, she says to me, don't take it so personally. Now, I must say that her response in other situations is well advised. Because there are things in our lives that we take personally that we should not take personally because it's not good for us. It's really not. Matter of fact, a common thinking error that creates all sorts of negative emotions is what's called personalization. I'll give you some examples of how we personalize things. Your neighbor's playing his music so loud that your walls reverberate. Or maybe you're sitting there at the red light and you hear this. You know, a thinking error would be, he's doing that just to make me angry. Well, no, not necessarily, not usually, really. Maybe he plays his music loud because he likes loud music. Maybe he plays his music loud because he likes that song. Or maybe, let's just say, he's inconsiderate and is not thinking of other people. But I hate to tell you, you're not in the picture. It's not about you. That's not why he plays his music so loud. It's the same way with, she sits across the room, she's doing this, and the other person says, you do that just to aggravate me. No, I'm just doing this because I'm doing this. I'm not doing it just to aggravate you. Some of this may be hitting close to home. You're not in the picture. There's no reason to be angry and have all sorts of resentments when you see that neighbor. Oh, there he is. You know what? He plays that. There he goes. He plays that music so loud and he does it just to make me mad. No. Another example, church member says to her pastor, sorry, I wasn't in church Sunday. You know, my niece was being baptized at First Church and we didn't want to miss that. And the minister responds, oh, well, of course. I mean, I understand. You don't need to apologize. That's actually where you needed to be. She continues, well, it was a great service. Have you ever heard Reverend so-and-so preach? She is excellent. I mean, she is really good. Now, what possible message did the minister hear her say? You stink. You absolutely are horrible. Did she say that? Did she say she's excellent and you're not? No, those words were not mentioned. Probably wasn't even in her mind. But boy, that minister sure now feels and walking away feeling injured and beaten up inside because he personalizes her statements in a self-negative way. Her ability to preach has nothing to do with me. I mean, nothing to do with another hypothetical minister. Last example, you feel, oh, it's all my fault. Your dog injured her leg, even though you weren't at home. It happened when you were shopping, and you begin to think to yourself, oh, if I had only stayed home, it's my fault. This is the mother of guilt because of the feelings of guilt and shame and inadequacy that it leads us to. These are the things and examples of what happens when we take things personally. So yes, there are times, probably most of the time, that we would be better off to heed the words of this lady who says to me, I did not mean anything by it. Besides, don't take it so personally. But this was not the case, and I responded to her, I can't help but take it personally. You see, my brother's children are a fourth meskin, your word, not mine. Am I only to love 3/4 of them? Am I only to love the white parts? I said, you're talking about my family. Well, it got really quiet. And she graciously apologized by saying, I didn't know. Precisely Jesus' point to the parable. Truly, I tell you, just as you did it to one of the least of these, those in need, those who are vulnerable, those who are in pain, those who are suffering, those who are powerless, those who need compassion, who are members of my family, you did it to me. And it doesn't matter if you knew it or not. Jesus took human need personally. Do you? Because when we take things personally, as I said, we often want to take matters into our own hands. We want to do something about it, which is exactly what Jesus demands of us. To take matters into our own hands, to do something about it when we see someone in need. That's what Jesus demands of us, his followers, to put God's love into action, to give of ourselves to those in need, to take them personally. Do what you can. Because when we don't take it personally, when we fail to see Jesus on the face of those in need, Jesus takes that extremely personally. Because to Jesus, they're family. Amen.